Okay, so Peter, that's at Tooltime, he shut up a Kalam follow-up clarification video, and I thought I would say some things about that. First, I again found Peter's video to be very interesting, very provocative. I think some things that I would want to say about it is that it seems like in so much of these kinds of discussion, and it's not something that he's doing, it's something that I think he's pointing out, but we're maybe in agreeing, and that so much of this isn't really sense making, it's just enabling us to overlook our nonsense. I mean, it's the language itself is confusing us so deeply, and we're trying to be specific about things, but so much of it seems so nebulous that it's odd to try to get scientifically rigorous about what came prior to all that we've ever known in the cosmos. Now, again, prior, as Peter would suggest, and I would agree, it just doesn't even make any sense. You can't say prior. I think there's just so many ways to show that this sort of sense making that we have about this is just problematic at best. I think the thing that I would also want to agree on is this issue of infinity. Infinity is the absolute bad word choice. Infinity, if you think about it, is a kind of indefinitely ongoing sequence where you imagine something added to what's an ongoing. It has certain properties of continuance in either space or time that is part of what we think of when we think of infinity. Whereas I think the word eternal is a much better word to get at some of the kind of mystery, at least that I'd want to address. If you take pi, for example, pi has an eternal and a sort of attempted infinity sequence. Now, someone might try to argue that pi, the sequence of pi, is infinite, and I would suggest that it's not, that the universe, the cosmos, will end, and to that extent it'll arbitrarily just cut pi off in its indefinitely ongoing, infinite sequence. So in that sense it's really not infinite. And yet the eternality of pi is still there. When I say the eternality of it, I mean pi as a regulative ideal that has ordered the cosmos when it comes into order. Now this goes back to this question of the singularity, or is the singularity a nothing, or what came before the singularity? Was there nothing? All of these before words that doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. But if I would try as best I could to explain this, I would say that yes, whether you want to call it the singularity or you want to call it a nothing, I would prefer to say the singularity is a special kind of nothing. That is, it included nothing in it, and the nothing in it was logically prior, not temporally prior. Okay? So in the singularity of all that is that which preceded the Big Bang, if we're going to try to talk of what was prior to the cosmos, what was prior to the Big Bang, if we're going to say that was a singularity, if it includes, or if it, see, the words don't make any sense, but it would just seem that there is a kind of nothingness that isn't going to go away. And that nothingness is a room-making nothingness, and that had to be included, and I think logically, not temporally, but logically it did. And when we say first there was nothing, then there was something, that's an error. We want to say first there was nothing. Again, logically first, not temporally. And then as the universe came into being, it included the nothing still. It wasn't as if there was nothing and then something rather than nothing. There was nothing and then something in addition to the nothing, which wouldn't go away and won't go away. I guess part of the problem too, I would say from my own perspective, was that unfortunately the more that someone would try to argue that there is some sort of singularity rather than a nothing, I think it ends up sounding a lot like a theistic position. That is, to the person who wants to really get scientific and haggle and say, no, there was a kind of this thing called the singularity that preceded, it sounds very much like theological talk. The idea of a nothing is, it could be the space that allows for self-relation. I mean, how is one able to relate to oneself if not by an odd kind of gap in oneself. It seems odd that one can have self-relation, and self-relation seems to be something that is throughout the cosmos. How is self-relation possible if not by an infection of a kind of room-making nothingness or a gap that allows relation with oneself possible? See, it seems like these are logical issues, not necessarily temporal ones. And I think some of the other issues here are that I think if these questions make sense, and if any of my talk makes sense, I don't think it makes any literal sense. I think it makes sense to poets and to people who feel, people who have a feeling for the sacred. Not fantastical miracles, no guy in the sky, no life after death, no divine intervention, no hokum. Point blank felt sense of the sacred. I think it comes from the mystery over how ineffable all this stuff is. When you sit and you go, what is all this stuff? It seems odd to say that it either came from this singularity stuff, which sounds very spooky, that there's some thing there that, it was inevitable, or to say that it was nothing and then it happened. It seems either one opens to just such a fantastical mystery that it's not that it's religious, but it almost seems like, it's so philosophical that it leans toward religiosity in some sort, because it just either, I mean, I think Peter's point about it's not, some sort of appeal to authority. Well, it's partly an appeal to an authority about those people who are going to tell us about the early beginnings of the cosmos, all these physicists and cosmology scholars, but it's also feelings, and there's just so much going on that it seems like we would want to use reason, but feelings are also very, I think, involved in some of this. That is, people's felt sense of the mystery of the unanswerability of such questions, and the sort of odd combination of, are we going to say that feelings are illegitimate because they too are very difficult to define? I think some of it, again, from my own perspective, it's the unanswerability of these questions, the way that language can hoodwink us into momentarily thinking we're making sense and sort of cover over our nonsense, and the whole thing is engulfed with what seem to be, you know, maybe oddly literalist, oddly, I don't know, it's hard to get at what would be an adequate way of talking about ultimate beginnings. I think there was, people know the Hawking discussion about the woman said, what's the, it's the ancient cosmology, what's the planet standing on, old planet standing on an elephant, and the elephant standing on a turtle, and it's turtles all the way down, right? I guess it's actually a William James point. But there does seem to always be this, what was prior? Well, what was prior to that? Well, what was prior? I mean, even if you go to the singularity, what was prior to that? I mean, so many peoples for thousands and thousands, millennia, they only could imagine cyclical time. The notion of linear time, of a time that had a beginning, seems very interesting. It's almost like, again, it's like it's introducing theological orientations by even talking about beginnings. What would it mean to say that the universe began? It makes it seem like it has a sort of telos, or a drive of some sort. I enjoyed the video quite a bit. I guess I'm more thinking about how would one intelligibly make room for the kind of nothingness that one could argue. I think if someone is going to say that there was a singularity, I would want to say, is there nothingness in that singularity? Is nothingness being included in there? If it's not, I'm very skeptical. Okay, well, thanks so much for the video. I really appreciate it.